Welcome to the Where Data Meets Business podcast, in which we discuss how data driven approaches can help you achieve business outcomes bigger, better, faster. I'm Sonia Ketkar, a former academic and researcher, current consultant, data enthusiast, and forever New Yorker. In today's episode, we're going to cover a few different topics related to artificial intelligence, or AI, such as AI infrastructure and investing in it. My guest today is David Yakobovitch. David is a visionary leader in the AI and data economy, currently serving as general partner of DataPower Ventures, a venture capital fund focused on applied AI, inference, and deep tech. With over a decade of experience in technical enablement and data science, David has held key roles at tech giants like Google, where he led data product development for Google Ads and served as an AI policy ambassador. He is host of the acclaimed Humane podcast and a frequent keynote speaker at Carnegie Mellon and Columbia University. He is also the founder of Tech Power Network, a community of peer collaboration events in New York City and Silicon Valley, and co-organizer of AI Realized Summit, the Enterprise AI Deployment Conference. David, thank you for being here and welcome to the podcast.
Wow. Well, Sonia, it's my absolute pleasure. And one of my favorite parts from your introduction that I love is forever a New Yorker. It's so good. I've been in New York now since 2014. It's the favorite place. And I think you and I can both agree, post-COVID, right? The economy is back and booming in New York City.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Long live New York. I mentioned some of your professional achievements when I introduced you, but it would be great to kind of track your career journey for us. So how did you get here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me, really the short of the story is I have been a math geek my entire life. My arc from middle school, high school, college was in these math competitions. If you could think back to the days when the TI-84 calculator was just coming out and we were doing math by hand, doing mental math competitions, writing on chalkboards and whiteboards at the universities to solve these academic competitions. That really has been the precursor of what took me into the data field. Now, of course, today we all know, and we'll get to this later in the conversation, how the leading chatbots and LLMs can solve all these competitions that I would spend minutes or hours by hand in seconds. So it's incredible to see how far we've come. And in the years since those competitions, I spent my career at 5 different startups, from pre-seed to pre-IPO, in different data product marketing, data science, and data product functions, as well as a Google. So it's been a great career arc, seeing every end from startup and scale up to big tech. And along that journey, I launched DataPower back in 2019 to invest in data products that improve lives. We have grown as a firm to now support over 40 portfolio companies, everywhere from also early stage AI agents to the AI infrastructure, category defining leaders, and the AI applications that have become household names that your audience and yourself and myself use perhaps each and every day. So it's so great to be here to speak with your audience and share some of the learnings we've discovered.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get deeper into understanding your investing policy and so on. But I really liked what you said about, how you used to, and I did as well, do math by hand on blackboards and whiteboards and so on. And it's interesting because even today I do some of my best thinking by just writing things down like that, or solving a math problem by hand, just the old fashioned way. So it's interesting we've come so far, but there is still some magic with, doing it the hard way or the manual way, so to speak.
There's an incredible amount of magic doing things rote, solving by hand, and unlocking creativity and workflow processes. And I cannot overstate it. I guarantee you, yes, the world is moving into a space where it's agents and co-pilots and human and machine agentic workflows. But with that said, early data that just came out in Q1 2025 shows that new software engineering bootcamp graduates are coding the worst they have ever done because they are relying purely on code assistance from GitHub Copilot, from Cursor, from Devon, and other platforms. And they're taking at face value what these code assistants can do. But then when it comes down to debugging and unit testing, reliability and resilience of code into hyperscale systems, things start to fall apart. So if I share a little nugget to audience members today, yes, I'm all in on LLMs and using these AI-powered tools. Though with that said, please learn the foundationals, learn those first principles so that you can truly understand A to Z how to solve systems.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that because, there are no shortcuts in life. You just you just have to do the work. Um, so you mentioned working with a few startups and then, of course, Google and so on, and working in the data science space. So what kind of business decisions were you supporting with with the data science work that you were doing in those roles?
Yeah, so I think every company was different, but two of the ones, startups that I spent a lot of my career in were both General Assembly, which got acquired by Adecco, and Galvanize, which got acquired by Stride or K-12 Learn. And what was so unique about these companies is this was before the pandemic when the new careers were no longer doctor or lawyer, but they were becoming software engineer, data scientist, data engineer, and AI specialist. And I ran technical enablement for these companies, working with Fortune 500 companies on how to augment non-technical business leaders with those skills in Python and SQL and prompts to create effective data science workflows and implement more automation into what would often be called only human processes. And so these were really exciting roles that I had, both in individual contributor capacity and team lead, because I spent a lot of my time not only teaching and consulting best center of excellence practices for data science workflows, but in addition, I would spend all day, every day in archive, looking at NeurIPS, checking out some of these leading PyCon conferences to see what was the latest technology and underpinnings coming out. And I recall very early on working even in like 2015, 2016 with BERT and these language auto completion tools, right? Where you could go one sentence to another. And it was so fascinating working with what we would call the early days of natural language processing. Wow, how far we've come in just a few short years.
Yeah, and every day I feel like we're moving faster. I just feel like it's so hard to keep up these days because everything is just moving at this breakneck speed, with all the developments coming at us every day. So did you subsequently at Google then, which is of course a large company, did you see any marked differences between how data was applied or utilized in the smaller startup space compared to like a much bigger fish in that pond?
Mm. Yeah, so when you think of startups from early stage to growth, even pre-IPO to Google, I think when you apply mental models, you're doing the same processes. The difference, though, is the speed at which you make decisions is a lot slower at big tech because big tech like Google, Meta, Amazon prioritize slow thinking. And slow thinking is a phrase that we may not hear about often, but it's where you're performing deep thinking into a process and all the decisions that are being made before you make that change. In fact, at Amazon, they're quite famous for having no presentations when you're unveiling a new metric, a new dashboard, or a new implementation. In fact, what product leads are required to do is create 6-page research briefings. And that was really to go deep into concepts. Now, at Google, we'd have a similar approach, but it's not these 6-pagers. You would have very short slide decks. We don't want 100-page, a consulting slide deck, but it might only be 5 to 10 slides, and each one is filled with information that's actionable and facts and references and different status indicators if something's at risk and on track, and building that holistic overview. So I think that's the big differentiator at big tech, because making one small change that you might say, oh, what's a different metric? What if we change a numerator versus denominator? Well, the trickle down effect, that could be to hundreds of systems, to so many different code bases, and you have to ensure that everything is covered, every dependency is solved for, to create as smooth landing of new features as well as launching of new products. So that's really a big takeaway I saw. And I think that slow thinking could be applied to startups as well. The difference, though, of course, with startups is you got to move faster, right? So while making a change at a Google scale system, you could spend 3-6 months to do that. In a startup, you have to compress that timing to ensure you can get product market fit. And traditionally, I'll add that while that's been Google's MO on how it would work across its product areas, one could see that Sundar, of course, accelerated and compressed that timeline with large language models, with the release of Gemini and Gemma and these other ones. And, when I was at Google, we were on the early Bard, the precursor of Gemini team. So we saw that compressed cycle, and it's quite incredible to see the speed at which Google's been moving.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see whether with AI we see convergence in that kind of speed and adoption with the large guys and this the startups or so on. But your discussion about startups and product market fit kind of gives us a good segue to talk about investing, which you've been doing. So I guess my first question is, how did you decide to get into investing? You obviously were doing really well with all the operator side of things.
Yeah, so for me, I got into investing because I've had this startup itch or startup bug as long as I could remember. When I was in high school, I would launch different projects for fun and see if I could, make $1,000 in 2 weeks. And what could I do? Of course, back then it was different types of services. And at college and post, I have participated in several dozens of hackathons all around the US. These are ones like the famous TechCrunch in Silicon Valley, to more regional startup weekends, which became part of the Techstars network, which got me quite excited about all things startups. Hackathons, of course, are different than launching a startup. In one weekend, you claim that you have built Spotify or Lyft or the AirPods, which in fact are 3 of the products that my teams made and won hackathons for, but it's so different.
Yeah, hackathons are always interesting. I've been sort of like an observer for many of them, and I feel like sometimes they just lead to the most, creative ideas, which you don't expect. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and what I'll add to there as well, is hackathons is only the beginning, but that excitement I experienced from Startup Weekend and being part of the Techstars community led me, when I moved to New York, to be an entrepreneur in residence at the Techstars New York City headquarters. And so I spent time with different cohorts of startups and got really comfortable working with founders in the earliest of days. And at that point, being already into my third startup as an operator, I wanted to deepen my skin in the game in the industry. And so I started cutting angel checks to some of these Techstar portfolio companies. And I would be like, hey, here's a $10,000 check. I'd love to be on your cap table in your friend and family round or pre-seed round. And the rest is history. I started investing in many startups in parallel, working for startups, and then launched my data and AI community, which is what today has become known as DataPower Ventures, being a focus on all things AI agents, AI infrastructure, and AI applications across the B2B and enterprise space. So it's been an exciting journey. I think definitely we were, I would say, we're early to the industry, and probably much like yourself, I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows with startups, scale-ups in the space, but we're now entering, one could say, a watershed moment of new parts of the industry that we haven't seen before, where data and AI is becoming accessible to anyone on any device at any time.
Yeah, for sure. So for the folks who are trying to keep up with the developments in AI, as you mentioned three terms. One was AI infrastructure, AI agents, and AI applications. In non-technical words, like what do each of those terms mean?
Yeah, sure. So let's say that how we view the world today is that you have a foundation layer. And the foundation layer or infrastructure layer, I would say, is probably most known by your listeners here. That would be the likes of OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, and other large language model companies, which could also include the likes of Mistral and DeepSeek and other players. And these are the infrastructure where anyone could create something by connecting to the APIs from these infrastructure companies. And these infrastructure companies do so well today that they automate the infrastructure. You don't need to set up Docker or Kubernetes. You don't need to set up complex API endpoints and webhooks. You don't need to set up a cloud provider through AWS, GCP, or Azure. They do it one-stop shop. You connect to them and it's done. It's consumption pricing. It's really simple. So that's the infrastructure layer. And that's been the driving factor for this new AI-powered economy. On top of the infrastructure layer, you then have the application layer, the specific things you can do with the AI. So if we think that you want to write a new book, for example, or you want to make an edit to a marketing brief, you may not do that necessarily only with O3 from OpenAI with reasoning. Instead, you might use a platform like writer.com or other applications that help you with that content. I mean, Writer raised a massive late stage round in the end of 2024. So they're what's known as the application layer, where instead of paying OpenAI directly, you're paying Writer. You have a subscription, you get access to their services, maybe another one's like Grammarly, right? Grammarly has some AI power features. And as you perform requests, you consume, instead of consuming data like storage and compute of the classic SaaS model, you consume tokens, right? The data is converted to tokens and you have input token and output token. And so that's the application layer. You're spending money based on the token usage. And there's so many types of these applications that exist today. Other ones, for example, can be we see things like our portfolio companies. We see Applied Excel, which is a company out of the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They have their own LLMs or ones that connect to the big players, where you could run in a pipeline of financial analytics and healthcare research papers, and then output recommendations or signals for what is being done. And so you have enterprise companies paying subscription licenses to a company like Applied Excel to get early signals or to receive pre-news on what stocks, what research is going to go to market, to FDA approval, to make better business decisions. And a company like that, in fact, has a shortcut on the Bloomberg terminal. So if you're a Bloomberg user, you could actually try out the Applied Excel large language model or their AI application that's running in that four-walled garden of Bloomberg and other ecosystems. So that's like layer 2, this application layer. And then the newest one, which has been talked about much the last year, has been the rise of agentic workflows or AI agents. So what does that mean? Well, the application layer keeps the human in the loop. Sonia or David, right? We're performing the action. We're doing the market research. We're asking the prompt. We're getting the result, and then we're making a decision: buy or sell the stock, change the brief, send the email, cancel the meeting. That's all done with a human. Now, the AI agent is about taking the human out of the loop, doing 100% automation. So there might be a request such as, maybe I'm a company, let's give an example, like Dodo Health, which is one of our portfolio companies. Dodo Health is a company, went out of Y Combinator. And what they do is they automate the front office for veterinarian clinics. So I don't know if you or someone else has owned a dog or cat and has to go to the vet clinic before, and you have questions. Can I see my bill? Can I get a prescription refill? You often have to email or go in person or talk on the phone or send a text. Could that be 100% automated with 99.9% reliability through an agent to support? And that could help create efficiencies, reduce costs for the front office, but also mean the veterinary practice has more meetings scheduled and could provide better quality of care for our pets, especially those that are aging. And so that could be the agent space. And that's a high level on infrastructure as well as applications and agents. I'll pause there. What's coming up for you on that, Sonia?
Yeah, no, that was super helpful. I actually posted this article on LinkedIn just yesterday about Meta, which is also getting into humanoid robots, and so the whole sort of and AI agents and everything AI related, and some of the topics that you talked about along the way. So that was really interesting. So the companies that you invest in through your your VC fund, do they cover like the entire spectrum of the three that you just topics that you talked about, or do you feel like one of them has more to offer at the moment, or you're seeing more companies that are coming up in one space out of the three that you invest in?
Sure. I definitely think there's actually more than those three bodies of work. And I think you did just call out, one of those core ones as Jensen Huang shared at CES in 2025 is physical intelligence, which is the rise of the humanoid robots. So that's probably a body of work number 4. And then a fifth one could be like Inference, right? Which is performing the analytics and dashboards and whether it's small language model, edge device on your, iPhone or Google Pixel, or running those tasks that are like in pipelines with, for example, posts that are being surfaced from X.com. There's so much in that space, but I do think, and we could dive into those two other areas as well, that infrastructure is the most mature space, right? Infrastructure is the chips, the large players. There's only going to be so many OpenAIs, Anthropics, and XAIs in the world. There's only going to be so many NVIDIAs, Groks, Cerebruses, and Samba Novas of the world, right? You can only have so many chip companies and foundational companies that take on that market share. We look at any trend throughout history, like the rise of mobile and cloud compute, usually it's only 10 companies maximum that take like about 90 to 95% of the market share. And we're going to see that same trend occur in these industries as the rise of AI and data and chips continues to accelerate in the coming decades. We can already see that clear with chips, circuit chips specifically, right? NVIDIA is like the de facto player in the space with GPUs. Sure, you have Intel and CPUs and ARM and AMD and others as well competing in alternative GPU, either on mobile or FPGA. But outside those companies, that's the majority of the share, and we'll see that also with infra. So it's really difficult to build an infrastructure company. It takes a lot of money. These days could be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more. So it's not for the faint of heart, and it takes many years to build that. I think to your question, like which one, like if I was a founder today, which one should I build in? Which one has the most opportunity? Hands down, application layer. And here's the reason I'm picking application layer and not agents. I love agents. We're investing in over a dozen agent companies already, and we're going to continue making those bets in AI agents. But it takes a lot of specialty focus to succeed with an agent-based company, because building AI agents means you're going 100% to automation. You're completely taking the human out of the loop. If you're taking the human 100% out of the loop, you need perfection in your results. One mistake and your customer is ending the contract. Let's create the hypothetical scenario that you're Salesforce and your agent force, and you're creating AI SDRs, which are these sales development representatives, which help with business development. And instead of having a college grad support there, you might have the agent to do that end to end, from taking phone calls to emails to pushing someone through the sales cycle. Well, if anything in culture or nuance or strategy is lost or misunderstood, and you were the client with the purchasing power, you'd go somewhere else for your business, right? We've all been there where we've been pitched services and you're comparing them all against each other. So I think while it's very exciting to build an AI agent space, and part of Y Combinator's request for startups, they do place the AI agents near the top area. It's very tricky to have high efficacy in your execution. And for that reason, I would encourage founders who are building today probably to lean in towards the AI application space, because you're building some sort of tool or system that human is part of that, right? Like I mentioned Writer.com earlier. They're not an agent, right? They can allow you to write your copy. And we've seen that trend only accelerate in the start of 2025. In the middle of February, the New York Times came out with a very strong statement saying they are now going to allow all editorial staff to use AI tools, and they're providing AI training for every team member of the New York Times. Now, let's not forget, in 2025, the New York Times is the top publication in the United States, outside of the Journal, WAPO, LA Times, and others. So this is a strong indication about the future of journalism and editorial and fact-checking, that it is going to be humans and machines. And so I would encourage companies, if you can build these AI-powered applications, look, if the New York Times is going all in, I'm sure a lot of other companies would pay for other AI applications for their workflows as well.
Yeah, excellent point there about the human-machine interaction piece of it, leading to more success. And interesting that you say that about the New York Times, because I read that too. And the first thought that came to my mind was, well, when the whole digital transformation took place, some years ago, where they went from paper-based newspapers to digital, they were a little slow on that, in that process. They were kind of left behind in so many ways. But it's nice to see that they kind of seem to have learned from that, and they're jumping in really quickly here with both feet in. So that's good to see. But when you started talking about this topic, not the New York Times, but just the different AI buckets, you said something about or talked about how there's a lot of it's expensive to make all these different systems and infrastructure and applications even. Um, what came at us as a surprise a few weeks ago was DeepSeek, because apparently they had come up with this whole the LLM based product, so to speak, with very little funding, or so they claim. So what are your thoughts on just DeepSeek overall, and just that whole controversy surrounding how they built their chatbot?
Yeah, DeepSeek is such a strong use case for innovation. And I'm sure it's going to become a Harvard Business Review case study, right? Where we're going to look back on like this DeepSeek moment. My short of DeepSeek is like, look, innovation is good for the global economy. Everyone innovates, every country innovates. It's a false premise to assume that the United States is the only company that can create large language models and build AI applications, right? If we look at every other industry, from cloud compute to e-bikes to food delivery to online shopping, mainland China and parts of Asia have some of the leading and cutting edge products and market in the space. So it's only a matter of time until we saw similar products coming out of mainland. And it should come as no surprise for those who are close to the LLM space that Alibaba's Qwen product line has been released often in parallel with what's come out from OpenAI, Anthropic, and other leaders in the last couple of years. And the results have almost always been at the level of the US, slightly above or slightly under. So it was only a matter of time, right, until we saw these kind of results. DeepSeek, for some context, was launched as a joint partnership between the state enterprise government and a large hedge fund called Highflyer. And so there were some myths that were propagated in the news early on, which was that the model only cost around 5.6 million US dollars. But after the fact, calculations indicated it may have cost somewhere from 100 to 150 million US dollars, which was on a similar cost in compute and storage and energy as what the models from OpenAI and Anthropic and others come out with. So in fact, it's quite a similar cost. Also, there was a comment that that they did some other techniques called distillation to create these models. That part was true, right? Which is what OpenAI learned is that they released what's called these new types of chain of thought models, which have become common in late 24 and early 25, which now have this thing called reasoning. And the reasoning is rather than just giving you a result, it thinks about the result, it reviews the result, and then the model could calibrate and make changes to get better results. But all that knowledge is shared via tokens, and inferior models can use that to learn how to reason. And so that's something that OpenAI learned quickly, is that according to Sam Altman, he stated the quote that we're on the wrong side of history for open source. Like, if he could have done it all over again, perhaps OpenAI would be an open source company. That's a comment that Sam shared early in 2025. We also saw, at the time of this recording, xAI's Grok 3 was just recently announced in limited preview in mid-February 2025, and some of the developers went to hand to take a look and see what they could uncover about the models, and they found out that showing the reasoning to users like yourself and myself has been largely hidden and disabled. In fact, xAI Grok 3 has been designed, it would seem, that, they still support reasoning, but that you and I will not know the reasoning that occurred. So they've actually disabled distillation to prevent or reduce those risks. Couple other things on DeepSeek I'll mention, and then I'll pause there, is it is a blessing for the industry, though, because it is open source, right? It's a great model. It's available. It's open source. Unlike previous models from Meta that claimed to be open source but didn't share all the weights and biases, DeepSeek did release all of that. And so it became a great research case study to review, like, well, what's possible and what's not possible with this model. And you could think much to like the database market. Today, almost all databases are free, right? You and I could use Postgres on anything we want. But if you want to have some more security and resiliency, you might use something like NeonDB or MotherDuck or Snowflake or Databricks, and so billions of dollars are spent every single year in databases, even though open source databases exist to allow you to, for free, store and manage your data. So I believe DeepSeek is a blessing for the industry because open source and free is going to exist. And we're just in the beginning of using large language models. Most of the world still doesn't use it, right? It's really the people in the Silicon Valley, the Silicon Alleys, and the tech centers that are using LLMs. It's only going to increase adoption in the next few years. And there'll be different price points, both free, limited, like OpenAI, $20 a month, or pro, right, where maybe you pay like $200 a month for these advanced capabilities. So there's a lot to unpack there. I think it's good for the industry, as we'll have seen on the financial markets, at least at the time of this recording, right? The impact that it seemed that DeepSeek had, what was called a Sputnik moment at the time, seemed to be an overreaction. And we've even seen companies, their stocks have come back up. At the time of this recording, if I'm looking, NVIDIA stock is just down, 3% a month after DeepSeek, which means that the market's pricing in that, what was a 30-40% drop, they say, well, guess what? DeepSeek's trained on NVIDIA GPUs. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, we're definitely going to see a lot more of that sort of, volatility in the market the minute there's a new surprise, and before people have had a chance to kind of, evaluate it and see if it's worth all the fuss. But one of the things that you mentioned about the reasoning feature, I'm actually a fan of the visible reasoning feature, just because I feel like it builds trust. As if I'm going to use it, I like to see how it's thinking, so to speak, or maybe reasoning is probably the best word for it, because some of these tend to appear to be black boxes, and they are black boxes because you don't know what's happening behind the scenes. You're just seeing what the output is, and to see a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes, I think it's good for just users in general. That kind of visibility. But anyway, before we sort of move on from the investing part of this conversation, if somebody wanted to pitch an AI startup idea to you, what do you look for? What should they sort of keep in mind if they were to make such a pitch?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you so much for the ask, Sonia. Well, first, if you're a founder listening, either on replay or you've stumbled upon DataPower Ventures, we're always welcome to learn about what you and your team are building. We have a pitch form on our website, and we're always happy to be fully compliant with confidentiality and sign any paper, right, as we learn about what you're doing. So we pride ourselves with that, and recusing ourselves from any competes, right, to ensure we could best support you and perhaps be an investor in what you and your team are building. With that said, to the core point that you were asking on, like, what do we see as like investability in a company? My general view is 2 core points. And the first point is we look for product velocity. Now, product velocity doesn't mean you build in a week what would take you a year to build, but that you're constantly shipping and releasing new things, even if they're small little bite-sized improvements to your code base, different features, right? And it's showing that you and your team have the ability to build and ship. Now, it doesn't have to be that you're all AI researchers from Carnegie Mellon University or leaders from Columbia Business College, right? But you could also be someone who's maybe using no code, low code, AI powered assistant tools, but you have that discipline, that rigor to build and showcase your product. And a lot of that is not just building for the sake of building. It's fact number 2, which is you're validating what you're building. You have design partners and pilots and MOUs where you're constantly seeing that your bet is aligned with the industry, and you're building for the industry so that you can turn on revenue, right, and grow and generate business income and accelerate that stream. And I think it's absolutely critical to do that because what some founders may not know if they're a first-time founder is that when you're building a startup and you're taking in venture capital dollars, the traditional VC model is looking for outsized returns. So, if someone's investing in you, and let's say your company is raising its first round, and for hypothetical purposes, we'll say the company's valued at $10 million US. The investor is probably not thinking, oh, I wonder what we can do to sell for $30 million, right? They're probably looking at, well, could this become $100 million, a $300 million, a $500 million, or $1 billion company, right? How can we get that to be 10, 30, 50, or 100x? And so sometimes founders, I share this because they might think too small about their vision, right? And it's okay if you, of course, have the 10-year vision, like we're going to be $1 billion company in 10 years, but let's still see what is that first wedge that you're going to own in Peter Thiel's language. What is that monopoly that you're going to completely take over or control in the market, and how are you going to make that happen? And so that's my feedback, right, for founders is, whether it's in your pitch or your materials or showcasing in your investor updates, you want to constantly be de-risking both your product and the business. And of course, it's not going to be hockey stick growth in almost all cases, but by showing these consistent trajectory on both product and business, you earn the trust of your investors. And, well, because you're shipping small little bite-sized improvements, you're getting constant feedback from your earliest customers. So it helps steer you in the right direction as you're building your startup into a scale-up.
Thank you. That was super helpful because now folks know what you're looking for and how to kind of think through their proposal. So one of the other things that you've been excellent at, and I know because I've attended some of your events, is building community around AI and data science and so on. It is also one of the hardest things to do, to build community. So how did you do it? And what have been some of the biggest sort of learnings and recommendations that you would make to somebody who is trying to build community, regardless of what topic they're doing it in?
Community is definitely the missing piece because I think the pandemic is really what shifted conversation. For those of us who've been, forever in New York, we remember the times of 2012, 2015, 2018, where there would be the massive meetups, right, with hundreds of people, but not just for the sake of meetup, right, talking about research and what they're building and creating and collaborating and presentations. And it was just such a fabulous time for innovation in New York and, of course, Silicon Valley and other cities. And the pandemic really isolated everyone for a considerable period of time. And it disrupted habits, right? And we all know from a lot of the research, right, that like Malcolm Gladwell's book and others, right, that habits take somewhere from 3 to 5 weeks, or about 30 or so repetitions, like working out, eating, coding, reading a book, etc. And so these were disrupted. And I think 2024 was the first year where people truly had the opportunity to get back to themselves, to be like, what was life back in 2018 to 2019? Can I do that again? It was truly the first year where things seemed normal. And what I decided to do is, in a lot of the previous startups I worked for, I was adjacent to these communities where I would do technical enablement. I would run teaching, consulting, webinars, workshops, etc. And I felt it was part of my mission to bring the community back together. We saw many of the leaders who had ran communities in New York City for many years. They left. They didn't come back. And so after we got our first COVID vaccines, I very quickly started having dim sums in Chinatown and happy hours in Midtown, where we bring together founders, developers, operators, investors, executives from the whole community, just to have a good time, collaborate, bring peers together, trade strategies, support each other in the growth, right? To make this less of a lonely journey. Now, 4 years in, we've done over 200 event activations between New York City and Silicon Valley. Everything from these founder peer mixers to our CXO operating partner gatherings, to the data AI pitch nights and happy hours, to our flagship AI conference called AI Realize that we held in October 2024 at UCSF about deploying AI in production. So I think it takes resilience, and it takes an important mission to understand why you're doing something. For me, community means everything. I think it's our superpower, frankly, at DataPower Ventures, bringing together everyone from startup to enterprise, the entire ecosystem. And I think that creates something special for the creators and the builders and those who are operating startups and scale-ups. But I think it takes more than that. I think it takes a focus on how do you envision the world? And it's that focus, right, which has led us to grow the Tech Power Network between New York and SF, and we have some other big things cooking. But it's also that alignment with the mission. We are not an events company. We do not do events to make money. We barely break even. Our goal is to create awesome, kick-ass events, right? Where founders, operators, developers just have a great time, no frills, just make it really all about that experience. And I think it's with that I'm continuing to build community and excited to be one of the leaders in that space, both in New York City and Silicon Valley. To your question specifically, right? Like if you were a community builder, like today, how would you go about it? It is probably unpacking some of the notes I just shared, thinking about your mission, your why, what's leading you to create this. And I think if you have that authentic mission and why, you'll bring people together with a good cause. And there's room for tons of community out there. So you can do it, get started, start small. I believe in you. I have conviction for what you're building in the community, and you should do it, because even when you have doubt that someone else is already doing it, that's okay. We live in a world of, billions of people, right? So it's your space. It's your time to create and build.
Yeah, that was really helpful, because there are a lot of people trying to build community, and as you said, authentic mission and alignment with that mission is important. Totally agree. Clearly, as we've heard in the last several minutes, you are wearing a lot of different hats. You are an investor, you've been an operator, you're a community builder, and you seem to be traveling a lot between the East Coast and the West Coast as well for this all of the different areas that you're involved with. So how do you integrate work and life? I'm sure it's not easy doing all the different things that you're doing.
One of my favorite role models, who I have great admiration and respect for, is Oprah Winfrey. Let me tell you why, and there's a few reasons. First, Oprah Winfrey always gave it her all. Even before she was, 40 years old, it was well known that, she was, not making much money, and she was giving her all as a newscaster and always trying to build herself up. But she never quit, right? That's something I really admire in who she is, right? That resilience, that discipline, that focus, which are characteristics I see in myself building community. Second, Oprah holds a very strong belief about life, which I hold to as well, is that you have one life, and it's not work-life balance is an American term, right? It's not a real thing, right? And well, it depends on how you prescribe to it and what mental models or systems thinking you hold on to, but you have one life. And what I really respected about Oprah is that whenever she would travel to a city for a meeting or something, she would gather a dinner, bring friends both new and unknown together, mix and connect and mingle and maybe generate business or have new acquaintances where you get to partner together out of that. And so I think that's so important. And that's what I honestly see in what I'm doing is building community, which will have that byproduct of supporting the entire AI ecosystem. And perhaps, we'll meet some great founders that DataPower Ventures will back. But for example, when I travel between New York and San Francisco, I'm a big runner. I'll go running with founders in SF. I'll go check out other events. I'll meet with different firms. We'll have dim sums in Sunset with both people in tech and friends. And I think that's the best part about building and being in tech today is we're in a space where you could truly be yourself. And I encourage you, for those who are listening, whether you're listening in 2025 or in the future, build the future you want, right? Build the world that you're creating for. There's always going to be indecision. There's going to be changing of the tides, changing of the guard, and some of these things are outside of your control, right? But what's in your control is the experience you're creating in your community, in your ecosystem. And if you can focus on that, I think you're going to build something great, build something to last, and you'll have a lot of empathy and excitement for what you and others are building.
That was an extremely inspiring note to be ending this conversation with. But before I let you go, do you have any recommendations for folks for podcasts, books, or any other, anything else, courses even that they could refer to get more familiar with any of the topics that we've discussed today?
Yeah, I'll have to definitely think on a few of these notes. I think one of my favorite ones I would recommend actually is one of our keynote speakers we had at the AI Realized conference back in October 2024. We had Paul Bayer of GAI Insights, and they run a research firm. They actually, you can for free on their website sign up for their newsletter. They run a multiple times a week newsletter on all the latest trends that we're seeing in the AI space, from things like agents and infrastructure and applications. Incredibly useful, really smart people who worked in the industry. And some of the tidbits, right, the knowledge that they share could be, hey, here's an article in TechCrunch about what NVIDIA is launching, to here's a new paper in arXiv and why you should check it out and why Cerebras launched it. really great. So I encourage that. And, for those listening, we can drop that link in the show notes. I think it's a great one for everyone to check out.
Yes, I'll definitely do that. I'll definitely link everything, that you mentioned and references to those as well. David, this was such a great discussion. I learned so much, and I know that our listeners will as well. So thank you for spending time with us today and for all the inspiring talk and great depth of knowledge that you have and sharing that with us.
Thank you, Sonia. My pleasure being with you in the audience.
Great. And for folks listening, to stay connected, please share and subscribe. You can also sign up to our newsletter, databusiness.substack.com. See you next time.